It's that time again. Yes, the GBNews pub is open and we're joined by Mark Francois. Mark, welcome to Talking Pints.
Thank you very much. Your good health.
Now, 20 years, Member of Parliament. The big news today is, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, nightclubs closing, all sorts of restrictions coming in. Sajid Javid has said tonight, no more restrictions in England until at least the new year. And they're kind of telling us to use our common sense. They're kind of saying that it's not for the government to micromanage every aspect of our lives. I mean, I am cheering this to the rafters, and I'm thinking to myself, about 100 of you misbehaved horribly the other week and went against your Prime Minister. Is that what's really going on here?
Well, it's remarkable how a backbench rebellion of 101 MPs focuses minds, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, let's not be churlish. This is the right decision.
Yeah, it is.
And, well done, Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And, we're asking people to use their common sense. We're being conservatives. We're trusting in the good sense of the British people. And so I think this is the correct decision because, look, what are we going to do? Are we going to do this every year? Is this going to become an annual ritual? So at some point, we have to trust people to exercise their nous, and I believe that's the essence of the decision, and I believe it's the right thing to do. And I say that as someone whose partner works in the NHS.
I mean, 2 or 3 weeks ago, he was talking about an emergency and all the rest of it, which maybe was as much about a political distraction as it was about anything else. But the good news is the hospitalisations are not going through the roof, even though case rates are. Mark, it's really interesting, looking at your career, you did stuff before politics, which is great. You actually worked in the private sector, which is great, because too few people, it seems to me, there's too much of this Oxbridge PPE stuff going on. But 20 years you've been there, and you were climbing the ladder quite successfully, weren't you? Because you had a series of shadow appointments in the early days when Blair and then Brown were in power.
Yeah. I worked for George Osborne, I worked for William Hague, I worked indirectly for Cameron when I was the Shadow Europe Minister. So, I worked for some of the best that we had, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were, on quite a good career path progression. And then, you get ministerial position, the armed forces job, which I know you particularly love.
Oh, I had a great privilege to do.
And you took that very, very seriously. And now you're a rebellious backbencher. Where did it all go wrong, Mark Francois?
I'll tell you where it went wrong. If wrong is the correct word. We had a referendum on whether or not to leave the European Union. After much debate, in which you and I played our part, the British people voted democratically and peacefully to leave the EU. If you remember, the government put around a booklet, £9 million of taxpayers' money, which famously said, this is your decision, the government will implement what you decide.
I took mine back to Downing Street.
Well, I've still got mine.
No, I took it back, I was 100%.
And, so the British people said, thank you very much, we've decided to leave. And the government said, that's the wrong decision. So they produced something called the Withdrawal Agreement, which did exactly the opposite of what it said on the tin, which would, when you work through all the Euro gobbledygook, and as you know as well as I do, you're a former MEP, how these things are written, the essence of the Withdrawal Agreement was it would have kept us in the European Union forever. And so I and a group of MPs who read the blooming thing and understood that fought tenaciously to stop it.
The Spartans.
The so-called Spartans. And I've written a book called Spartan Victory, which you very kindly allowed me to mention.
Yeah.
And that tells our story. It tells why we fought to the bitter end, why we defeated the government 3 times with others, because we knew what was at stake. And if they got that through, we would have been trapped in the EU forever, despite the democratic decision of the British people.
I agree with you, and thank God for the Spartans. Very interesting, though, isn't it, that there were 3 votes, and a certain Mr Johnson, and even Jacob Rees-Mogg, which I couldn't believe, on the 3rd time of asking, caved and voted for this dreadful agreement, which I have to say I was deeply disappointed by. No, look, what you did was great, because the Tory party didn't have the guts to get rid of Theresa May. They had the chance, and you gave me the opportunity to come in with the Brexit party, get the Conservatives their worst result in 200 years, and she was gone. So I think between you guys within and us without, we did guarantee that we would get Brexit. But you know something? Where Brexit is right now, it's not really as good as it should be, is it?
Well, we left the European Union after
that's the good bit.
after 3.5 years, and forgive me, but what the book's called The Inside Story of the Battle for Brexit, and it explains in layman's English what was really going on, what was really in the withdrawal agreement, why it was so cleverly camouflaged. What were all these motions in the Commons? What was the Brady Amendment? What was the Malthouse Compromise? So it actually takes the reader behind the scenes into Parliament and explains what was going on. So when people were at home literally shouting at the television about why are these MPs not implementing what we voted for, this explains why they weren't doing it and how a group of us in the end intervened to try and make sure that they did. So it takes you behind the scenes and it explains in detail in everyday English what was really going on. And that's why I wanted to write it, so there'd be a record of that anybody could understand.
Leadership's a very important thing. And Sarah Vine this morning wrote something very, very strong in the Mail. Leadership is not about taking the path of least resistance or always opting for the safest course of action. As Johnson's great hero Churchill showed, it is about making difficult choices in impossible circumstances and ultimately having the courage of your convictions. I think I know what the British Bulldog would have done in this situation today. Let's see what Boris decides. Now, that was Sarah Vine this morning writing, urging him to make the decision that clearly today has been made. But the Conservative Party now is in a sense of real crisis. It's led by a man who went for Brexit but didn't really fully go for Brexit because he let you down at the last minute like a cheap pair of braces. You won't comment on that, I know.
Well, no, I will.
Go on.
And I say in the book why I think he did it.
Go on.
Because I think by that stage, Boris and some around him were looking ahead. You know, we were focused absolutely on the treaty. It was apparent by that stage that Theresa May was not going to get it through. Therefore, she was unlikely to survive. Right? And
No. She was going to survive because you guys had the chance the previous December, and you didn't have the guts to do it.
Well, hang on. Well, don't look at me. I'm one of the 112.
But it needed 45 people. It needed 45 people in December 18 to put up a motion of no confidence in her. You didn't do it.
Well, no, we had the vote of no confidence. We got the 48 letters. We had the vote. 200 voted to keep her. Yeah. 117 voted not to keep her. I was one of the latter group.
Yeah.
But by the time you got to MV3, it was obvious that she couldn't survive much longer. And I think at that point, Boris and some around him had worked that out. And they, if you like, were looking to the future. And I think, at the end of the day, you'd have to have him on and ask him yourself, Nigel. But I suspect that what they were doing is, if you like, they were thinking too tactical. They were thinking too tactical bounds ahead. But by the way, there's a humorous story in here about the time that Boris nearly got shot in Israel about 20 years ago.
I've never heard this story.
Well, it's in there very quickly. We were on a trip. It was a CFI trip with George Osborne and Theresa Villiers, and we were shown this security fence, and we were told how incredibly sensitive it was, and it's got all these whatever you do, touch the fence. So they take us out of the command centre. What does he do? He walks up to the fence. What happens if I do this? I mean, what's really going to happen? Anyway, about a minute later, this Jeep comes screaming over the hill. These 4 Israeli commandos, kind of dripping grenades. And this sergeant leaps out of the Jeep and he said, "Who touched the bloody fence?" And we all went, "Him." And, I think if Boris had given him any back chat at that point, he might well have been shot, and the whole history of the United Kingdom could be done. Now, I know we have limited time.
No, we're OK. And I knew you'd written the book, and I was keen to get you on.
Yeah.
And it was a very important thing you did. Very, very important thing that you did. But it also links, there's one other thing that I do want to talk to you about, which I think is related to it, is your great friend, Sir David Amess, getting murdered the way that he did.
Yeah.
How dangerous is it now being an MP?
Well, firstly, I dedicated the book to Sir David. Right. We were great friends, Nigel. He was genuinely my greatest mate in that place. Yeah. I'd never have been an MP without him. He mentored me when I turned up. And I miss him terribly, to be honest. So I dedicated the book partly to his memory. How dangerous is it to be an MP? To some degree, it's always been dangerous. Spencer Perceval, the British Prime Minister, was assassinated in the Commons in 1812, right? So there's always been a certain element of risk involved in the job, But at the end of the day, you know, we have a job to do. We have constituents to represent. And what I've got to choose my words carefully because there's a trial pending. You'll understand that.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the principle shines through. We have to continue to represent those people, and we cannot allow anyone of ill intent to break that cord, if you like, between an MP and their constituents.
But you should have security.
Well, there's a review underway by the House of Commons authorities. I'm not going to preempt that review. David had some surgeries already booked ahead when what happened in October happened. If you like, I honoured those surgeries and I did them and tried to help a few of his constituents. I'm not going to preempt the outcome of the review, but one way or another, it is fundamentally important that constituents can still contact their MP.
No, absolutely. Look, you know, nobody went out and met more people all over the country than I did, year after year after year, but I did it with people with me.
Yeah.
And I did it with intelligence,
yeah.
You know, and people checking social media and all those things. How long is Boris going to last as PM?
Ultimately, that's in the hands of the electorate. That's the British system. In the short,
it may not be. I mean, we don't vote for prime ministers.
Yes, but we have a well-established system where the leader of the winning party...
How much longer are you lot going to put up with him? I mean, you know, he's 8 points behind in the polls. All right, they're midterm polls, and I get that. Today's decision is a good one, but in many, many ways, it doesn't even... I was with 2 former Tory MPs this morning. Both of them said to me they haven't renewed their party subscriptions. They don't even recognise the party as being conservative.
Nigel, I sort of have a reputation for kind of, a bit like you, if I make so bold, of sort of saying what I think. Here's what I think. Boris's fate lies in his own hands. There are a lot of people in the Conservative Party who are concerned about the direction that we've taken in the last 6 to 9 months. If Boris listens to that and he reacts to it accordingly, I think he can lead us into the next election and win it. I genuinely believe that. If he doesn't listen to those concerns, if he doesn't listen to the sort of muttering below deck, you know, then there could be trouble. So my honest answer to your question is it really depends on Boris himself and whether he'll listen to advice and whether perhaps he'll get some different advice from some different people.
Well, lots of weathers, lots of... Mark, thank you for coming on.
Lastly, I write in here, in all sincerity, I won't read it out because I won't embarrass you, and your viewers should know, you didn't know I was going to do this, but I believe it to be true that if you'd never been born, we would still be in the European Union. And I explain why in this book.
Thank you.
So if you would allow me, this is for you.
That's terrific. Thank you very much indeed.